Henry Ford. You hear that name and you instantly think of cars, right? Assembly lines, the whole engine of the 20th century. But here's the thing. Ford didn't just build a car company. In a lot of ways, he was the architect of modern life as we know it, from how we work to what we buy, and that's the incredible story we're going to dig into.
You've probably heard this one before. It's his most famous quote, and it is pure, uncut Henry Ford. Blunt, super efficient, and totally focused on one thing, making things on a massive scale. For him, speed and a low price tag were everything. If that meant you didn't get to pick your color, so be it. The real goal was to get a Ford in every single American driveway.
Oh, not even close. Seriously. Behind that legendary no-nonsense image is a guy who was just full of these profound and frankly really disturbing contradictions. To understand Henry Ford, you have to wrestle with a legacy that's both brilliant and, well, deeply poisoned. So let's start peeling back those layers.
Okay, first up, the revolution. And you really can't overstate just how radically Ford changed everything. I mean, he didn't invent the automobile, we all know that, but he basically invented the car industry. And in the process, he put the entire world on a brand new path. And when you look at this timeline, what's just wild is how fast it all happened. In just one decade, he went from starting the company to rolling out the legendary Model T, and then, only 5 years after that, perfecting the moving assembly line. This wasn't just a little innovation. It was a complete and total reinvention of how we make things.
And this is the result. Over 15 million. That's how many Model Ts they made. For the time, that number was just unthinkable. It was a production record that stood for an incredible 45 years. The Model T wasn't just a car, it was a global phenomenon.
But here's where Ford's genius really kicks in. It wasn't just about how he built the cars. It was about who he was building them for. He came up with this idea that we now call Fordism. And it's actually pretty simple. If you pay your workers enough money, they don't just stay your employees. They become your customers. You're not just building cars. You're building a middle class.
And that idea brings us right to the first huge paradox of Henry Ford. On one hand, he was seen as this champion of the working man, this guy who was sharing the wealth. But on the other hand, he was a ruthless tyrant who demanded absolute, total control.
I mean, can you imagine this hitting the newspapers? In 1914, Ford just decides to start paying his workers $5 a day. That's more than double the average wage, overnight. It was an economic earthquake. People called him a hero, a progressive visionary, and yeah, it was also a brilliant business move. It stabilized his workforce and brought all the best mechanics in Detroit running to his factory. And this slide just lays out that contradiction perfectly. The promise was amazing. That $5 wage, the 40-hour work week he later introduced, this whole idea of welfare capitalism. But the price you paid for it? Yeah, it was steep. That famous wage came with a whole bunch of strings attached, policed by a so-called social department that would literally investigate workers' private lives. And Ford was ferociously, violently anti-union. To make sure nobody stepped out of line, Ford had a guy named Harry Bennett, and his service department was basically Ford's private army. We're talking intimidation, brute force, anything to crush attempts at unionizing. It all came to a head in events like the infamous Battle of the Overpass, where union organizers were just savagely beaten by Ford's thugs. So the visionary of the $5 day was also a complete tyrant. But Ford's contradictions went way beyond the factory floor. And honestly, this is where things get really, really dark. He took his mastery of mass production and applied it to a totally different product: hate propaganda. And this was his weapon. In 1918, Ford bought this local newspaper and turned it into his personal national mouthpiece for some of the most vile anti-Semitic ideas imaginable. And get this, he made every single Ford dealership in the country distribute it. He was mass-producing conspiracy theories and shipping them to every corner of America. And, people noticed, especially the wrong people. This quote, it's just chilling. It comes from Adolf Hitler himself, who told a reporter that he kept a life-sized portrait of Henry Ford in his office. The man who put America on wheels was a hero and an inspiration to the man who would plunge the world into darkness. And look, the facts here are just stark. They speak for themselves. Ford took his newspaper articles and published them in a book called The International Jew, which was sent all over the world. He is the only American praised by name in Hitler's manifesto Mein Kampf. And in 1938, the Nazi regime gave him the Grand Cross of the German Eagle, its highest honor for any foreigner.
So, where does that leave us? How do you even begin to square these two versions of the same man, the builder and the bigot, the innovator and the ideologue? Well, the truth is, you can't. You can't separate them. His legacy is the story of both, all fused together. On one side, you have the builder, the guy who gave us mass production, who helped create the entire consumer society we live in, who even helped give us the weekend. But then you have to look at the other side, the bigot, who used those very same mass production techniques to spread hate on a massive scale. The man who fueled Nazi ideology and left a legacy that is just forever stained. So we're left with this really unsettling question, right? We all live in a world that was, in large part, built on Henry Ford's genius, the efficiency, the consumerism, even the rhythm of our work life. But that world was also shaped and poisoned by his hate. We can't celebrate one and ignore the other. And wrestling with that uncomfortable, complicated truth is the only way to really understand the man and the modern world he made.